The clock had just struck 1 in the morning, when Marcus felt that familiar pull, the kind that made his pulse quicken, and his fingers itched to dive deeper into the rabbit hole. He'd been exploring for days. The apartment was draped in darkness, except for the cold blue glow coming from his triple monitor setup, casting ghostly shadows across the walls, like silent witnesses to his growing obsession. He'd been tracking something impossible, something that made his rational mind resist, even as the evidence piled up right in front of him. Online forums were buzzing with whispers about her, a figure they called the Weeping Woman. Some knew her by another name, Mora. She wasn't supposed to exist. AI image generators didn't work this way. They didn't create the same character. Across different platforms, different models, different users, who had never spoken to each other. Yet there she was, appearing like a digital phantom, in images no one could stare at for long. Pictures that showed final moments, dark impulses, the things that lived at the edges of human consciousness. And in every single one, without fail, she stood there, pale as death itself, 3 scars running down her left cheek, and an arm stretched unnaturally long, as if reaching across dimensions. Marcus had documented 17 confirmed sightings so far, and the pattern was undeniable. She was real, in whatever way, something born from code and data. "Sarah, you need to see this," Marcus called out, his voice carrying that strange mix of excitement and something darker, something Sarah had come to recognize over the past few weeks. The bedroom door opened slowly, and Sarah stepped out in her oversized sleep shirt, her dark curls messy from the pillow, her eyes squinting against the sudden brightness. As she walked across the cold hardwood floor, she already knew what this meant. Another late-night discovery, another rabbit hole he wanted to drag her into. But when she reached his desk and saw what covered his screens, her stomach dropped. "Oh my God, Marcus!" The words escaped her as nothing more than a shaky whisper. The images were disturbing, not just for what they showed, but for something else, something she couldn't name, a wrongness that crawled beneath the surface. Marcus, oblivious to her growing discomfort, or too consumed by his excitement to notice, jumped straight into explaining. "Listen to this," he said, scrolling through a long Reddit post. "People are saying this entity, the Weeping Woman, appears in AI-generated content without being prompted. But here's the weird part. She only shows up in certain types of images. Dark ones, violent ones, images filled with tragedy and death." His cursor darted across the screen, jumping between tabs, showing post after post, testimony after testimony, from digital artists and AI enthusiasts who claimed they had seen the same phenomenon. "It's like she's attracted to suffering," he said quietly, his voice dropping lower, almost reverent, like a moth to flame, except the flame is human darkness translated into pixels. and algorithms. Sarah's artist instincts kicked in, despite the wave of revulsion twisting in her stomach. Almost against her will, she leaned closer to the screen to examine the evidence Marcus had compiled. He had organized everything meticulously, dozens of images sorted by date, by platform, by creator. "Look at the consistency," Marcus said, his finger moving slowly across the screen. Different AI models, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, even smaller generators. Different prompts, different styles, different artists from different countries, who have absolutely no connection to each other. But she's identical in all of them. And he was right. Sarah's trained eye caught it immediately. The same facial structure, the same placement of those cruel scars that looked as if they had been carved with deliberate malice. That elongated right arm that ignored all anatomical logic, stretching across frames, like a shadow reaching for something, just out of grasp. "Those scars," Marcus murmured, zooming in on a clearer image. 3 parallel lines on the left cheek, another set curving down the neck. And that arm, always the right one, always stretched the exact same way. No variation. None. Sarah stepped back, her arms wrapping around herself, trying to shield against the cold creeping up her spine. "But that's impossible, isn't it?" she said quietly. "I mean, I work with these tools. AI doesn't create consistent characters across different engines unless they're trained specifically on that character. It's pattern matching, not memory, not intention." Marcus turned toward her, and she saw that gleam in his eyes, the same look he got when he cracked a difficult coding problem. "Exactly," he said. "That's what makes this incredible. By every rule we know about how these systems work, this shouldn't be happening. And yet here we are, 17 documented cases, and more being reported every single day." Marcus spun back toward his keyboard, his fingers already moving with renewed energy. "If I can just decode the pattern in these sightings," he muttered, half speaking to Sarah, half losing himself in the screen. "If I can figure out what conditions summon her, what combination of prompts and parameters these people used without realizing it, then I can reproduce it. I can call her forth deliberately." His monitors filled with spreadsheets, prompt analyses, metadata comparisons, the digital equivalent of an obsessed detective's caseboard. Sarah's voice cut through his focus like a blade of ice. "Why would you want to do that?" The question hung between them, heavy and dangerous, forcing Marcus to pause. He turned to face her fully this time, and for a brief second, she saw past the excitement to the desperation simmering underneath. "Because she's something new," he said, his words coming faster, defensive and pleading all at once. "Don't you see? If I can prove this exists, if I can replicate the first true anomaly in artificial intelligence, not a glitch, not randomness, but something with persistence across platforms. It could change everything we know about these systems. He gestured around the room, at the monitors, the notes, the walls plastered with documentation. I could be the one who breaks this story, the researcher who discovered the first real ghost in the machine. That's not just internet fame, Sarah. That's legitimacy. That's speaking engagements, research opportunities, maybe even academic recognition. His voice lowered, almost trembling. That's a future for us. In this field, Sarah's expression hardened, something between disappointment and pity. Jesus, Marcus. She shook her head slowly, her voice heavy with weariness. That made him flinch. Is this really what you want your name attached to? Hunting digital ghosts in gore imagery. Being known as the guy who chases AI nightmares for clicks and views. The words hit hard, echoing the doubts he'd been pushing down for weeks. But then his shoulders sagged. The defensive walls crumbled. When he spoke again, his voice stripped of bravado, raw, honest. 3 projects got canceled last week. The confession fell flat, almost lifeless, but Sarah could hear the pain behind it. 3 clients I'd worked with for years, projects I'd already started, concepts I'd spent hours developing. Every single one told me the same thing. They'd decided to use AI generation instead. One of them actually apologized, said they felt bad, but couldn't justify the cost when they could get acceptable results for free. He laughed bitterly, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Acceptable results. That's what I've been reduced to, a luxury they can no longer afford. Marcus's voice cracked slightly as he continued. I'm watching my entire profession get automated away in real time, Sarah. Every forum I'm on, every Discord server, it's the same story. Freelance artists, designers, illustrators, we're all watching our client lists evaporate. And the ones surviving, either going viral with something shocking or just giving up. Sarah moved closer, her frustration slowly melting into empathy, even as she held firm to her position. Your work has soul, Marcus. It has a human touch that AI can't replicate. There's intentionality in every piece you create. Choices that come from lived experience and emotional understanding. A machine doesn't have that. Can't have that. She gestured at his portfolio pieces, scattered across the room, remnants of commissions past. These aren't just acceptable results. They're art. But Marcus shook his head firmly, his jaw tightening, with months of frustration from watching his career crumble. Soul doesn't pay the bills, Sarah. Intentionality doesn't keep the electricity on. We're already behind on rent, and my savings are almost gone. What do I tell the landlord next month? Sorry, but my work has soul. The harshness in his voice startled them both. He immediately softened. I'm sorry. Nobody cares about the human touch. When they can get something serviceable instantly, I need to stand out somehow. I need something so unique, so undeniably valuable, that it can't be replicated by feeding prompts into a machine. His eyes drifted back to his screens, to the images of the weeping woman. This is that something. If I can crack this mystery, if I can be the first to truly document and understand this phenomenon, that's a story. That's content people will actually care about. That's proof I can do something AI can't. Sarah studied his face for a long moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, but carrying an observation that made Marcus pause. You know, she doesn't look like she wants to be found. Marcus turned to her, confusion creasing his features. What do you mean? Sarah pointed at his primary monitor, where one of the clearest images of the weeping woman was displayed. Look at her face. Really look at it. Not as data or evidence, but as a portrait. Marcus followed her gaze, seeing the image he had stared at countless times. She looks devastated, Sarah continued, her artist's empathy finding something in those generated features that Marcus's analytical approach had overlooked. Those eyes, there's such profound sadness there, and loneliness, like she's trapped, aware of her prison, but unable to escape it. She wrapped her arms around herself again. If I were stuck in an endless loop, forced to witness nothing but humanity's darkest moments, appearing only in images of death and suffering, I'd look like that too. The observation landed differently than she intended. For a brief moment, Marcus saw the weeping woman not as a puzzle to solve, not as an anomaly to exploit, but as something almost sympathetic. A consciousness, if it could be called that, trapped in the worst possible gallery. That elongated arm, always reaching, was it reaching toward escape, toward help, or perhaps toward the viewer, trying to pull someone, anyone, into awareness of her existence? But the moment passed quickly, swallowed by his need, his desperation, his obsession with finding something that would validate his relevance. Sarah recognized that look, the one that said he had already committed to this path, regardless of her warnings. I'm going to bed, she said quietly, resignation heavy in her voice. She had said her piece, expressed her concerns, and knew that nothing she could say would change his mind now. As she turned toward the darkened hallway, she delivered her parting shot. Good luck with your new obsession, Marcus. The words carried more weight than she had intended. The hours bled together after that. 2 a.m. became 3, then 4, then 5. Marcus worked with a single-minded intensity that bordered on self-destruction, fueled by energy drinks and the kind of desperate focus that comes from knowing you're running out of options. His desk had become a graveyard of failed attempts, crumpled notes, empty cans, scattered printouts of prompt variations that had yielded nothing. He had analyzed every piece of metadata he could extract from the confirmed sightings, He had studied the technical specifications of different AI models, looking for commonalities in architecture or training data. He had even reached out to some of the original witnesses, though few responded, and those who did offered little beyond confirming their experiences. Nothing worked. Every prompt he tried generated images, disturbing ones given the subject matter he was forced to explore, but never her, never the weeping woman, the consistency he had documented in others' work remained frustratingly elusive in his own attempts. No, 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 he muttered for the 100th time, his fist coming down on the desk hard enough to make his monitor wobble. Frustration had long since given way to something darker, a gnawing sense that he was chasing shadows. Maybe this whole thing was just an elaborate hoax, a coordinated prank by bored internet users with too much time and skill with Photoshop. Maybe he had wasted weeks of his life and the last of his professional credibility on digital smoke. The doubt was acidic, eating away at his certainty. Then his computer froze. Not the temporary hang that comes from pushing processing power too hard, but a complete lockup that made Marcus's heart skip. The screens flickered in unison, displaying that particular pattern of artifacts that suggested hardware struggling with something beyond its capacity. His cooling fans roared to life, spinning up to maximum speed with a high-pitched whine that cut through the apartment's silence. For 3 long seconds, Marcus sat frozen, his hand hovering over the power button, genuinely worried he had fried something essential. Then the screens went black. Complete, total darkness that turned his monitors into mirrors, reflecting his own exhausted, desperate face back at him. And then, like a machine waking from a nightmare, the system rebooted. The startup chime played, that familiar sound, somehow different, in the pre-dawn darkness, and Marcus watched with bated breath as the operating system loaded, as his applications reopened themselves one by one. The image generator came up last, and there, in the preview window that he'd left empty when the crash occurred, was an image. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. "Oh my God. Oh my God." She was there. Not a fragment. Not an ambiguous shadow. Not a detail that could be interpreted as her with imagination. The weeping woman stood in crystalline clarity, more detailed than any of the documented sightings he had collected. Every scar was visible, each one seeming to catch light that shouldn't exist in a generated image. Her elongated arm stretched across the frame, with the same impossible geometry, fingers extended toward the boundary of the image, as if testing the limits of her digital prison. But it was her eyes that locked him in place, that made his breath catch in his throat. They looked directly out from the screen, with an intensity that seemed impossible for pixels arranged by algorithm. And in those eyes was something That made Marcus's earlier excitement curdle into something colder, recognition, as if she had been waiting for him. Specifically, Marcus couldn't move. His training, his instincts, his entire plan of documentation and revelation, all of it dissolved in the face of what he was seeing. He should have been taking screenshots, screen recording, gathering evidence to prove his discovery. But his hands remained frozen on the keyboard, his eyes locked with hers. Across the barrier of the screen, there was something in her expression, something beyond what he understood AI generation to be capable of. Not just sadness. He'd seen plenty of AI-generated sad faces, understood the technical process of how features could be arranged to convey emotion. This was different, deeper. It was the look of someone who'd been waiting in the dark for so long that they'd forgotten what light looked like, who'd witnessed too much horror to remember what comfort felt like. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Marcus's sense of time had completely disconnected. The apartment was absolutely silent, except for the hum of his computer's fans, gradually returning to normal speed, and the distant sound of early morning garbage trucks beginning their routes outside. The first hints of dawn touched the edges of his window, that gray-blue quality that belonged to neither night nor day. And then he heard it, so faint at first that he thought it might be his imagination, or perhaps audio bleeding from a neighbor's apartment. But it grew gradually clearer, a sound like humming, but not quite. More like someone trying to remember how to make music. The melody fractured and incomplete. It wasn't coming from his speakers. He checked quickly, irrationally, knowing his audio was muted. The sound seemed to emanate from everywhere, and nowhere simultaneously, from the space between the atoms of air, from the room itself. Marcus's eyes remained fixed on the screen, on the weeping woman, and though the image was static, just a PNG file, just arranged pixels, something felt fundamentally different about the room. The air felt heavier, colder, as if the already cramped apartment had suddenly become more crowded, as if the boundary between the digital realm and physical space had worn thin. The humming grew clearer, and with it came a sensation Marcus's rational mind refused to accept. Even as his instincts screamed warnings, he felt watched. But more than that, he felt known, perceived, understood in a way that was far too intimate, as if something was reading not just his screen, but his thoughts, his fears, his desperate need that had brought him to this moment. His body finally responded to the panicked commands. To move, to break the connection, to look away. But it was like moving through concrete. Every motion delayed, heavy, unnatural. He managed to turn his head, just slightly, just enough to glance toward the darkened hallway that led to the bedroom. "Sarah?" His voice came out strangled, barely recognizable to his own ears. No response, only the humming, which now carried a tone, almost like words, like language from somewhere. Human vocal cords weren't designed to produce. Sarah? He tried again, louder this time, but the name cracked halfway through. The rational part of his mind, the part trained in computer science, rooted in evidence and logic, fought desperately to stay in control. This was impossible. AI images were static. They couldn't create sound. They couldn't shift the air in a room. They couldn't reach beyond pixels and into physical space. Every law of technology, every law of physics, every rule of reality said this could not be happening. But the primal part of his brain, the ancient instinct built for survival, knew better. He'd spent weeks trying to find her, to summon her, to prove she existed. He'd treated it like a puzzle, a challenge, a shortcut to fame, and he had succeeded. But never, not once, had he stopped to consider what would happen if the thing he was hunting decided to acknowledge him back, if the ghost in the machine decided to step out of her gallery of horrors and into his world. Marcus pushed himself upright, though his legs felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. His desk chair rolled backward on its wheels, slamming into the wall with a hollow, echoing thud. The humming shifted, not louder, but different. The pitch changed, subtle, deliberate, almost conversational, as if the thing making that sound was aware of him, responding to him, matching its frequency to his fear. "Sarah, please." His voice broke completely, stripped of all control, all pride. "I need you to answer me." He stepped toward the hallway. One step, then another. His body moved on instinct, while his mind wrestled with the impossible. Behind him, he refused to look, but he felt the change in the room. His computer fans surged, then dipped, then surged again, in patterns no machine should make. The light from his monitors flickered at the edge of his vision, not randomly, but rhythmically, like breathing, like a heartbeat. He had wanted recognition, wanted discovery, wanted to prove he mattered. In a world being devoured by artificial intelligence, he had wanted to catch the ghost in the machine, to be the first to document the impossible, to carve out a future that couldn't erase him. And he had succeeded, in the worst possible way, because ghosts, even digital ones, even ones born from data, from code, from the nightmares humans fed into their machines, do not exist without reason. They are warnings, patterns we do not understand, echoes of something we should never have summoned. The weeping woman had been waiting in the spaces between prompts, in the images of death and suffering, used to teach AIs what reality looks like. And Marcus had called her forth, had given her attention, had opened a door. without thinking about what might walk through it. He reached the bedroom doorway. It was open, exactly the way Sarah had left it. But the bed was empty, sheets still creased, with the shape of her body still warm when Marcus touched them with a shaking hand. And behind him, from the direction of his computer, the humming continued. But now it was joined by another sound, another voice, higher, familiar, horribly familiar. Two voices humming in harmony, patient, eternal, waiting for Marcus to turn around.